This right here is the Microsoft Xbox 360. Time to review it. After Microsoft showed the gaming masses that they had what it takes to make a good gaming console, people were intrigued to see what Microsoft would do next for their second generation Xbox console. And boy, were they ready to wow the crowd. Microsoft was promising that their next Xbox would be a huge jump over the original Xbox. And in 2005, they unveiled the Xbox 360. Sporting true high-definition capabilities, a much improved Xbox Live infrastructure, user upgradable hard drive, a wireless controller right out of the box, and a slew of multimedia capabilities, the Xbox 360 was about to become the most impressive Xbox yet. With the Xbox 360 launching nearly a full year before the PS3, being much easier to develop for, and being at a much affordable price, Microsoft had the upper hand. It wasn't all perfect for Microsoft though. The Xbox 360 had one problem, and it was a very big one. The Xbox 360 was notorious for serious hardware failures. The Xbox 360 had a big design flaw that caused the system to overheat and fail, which led to the hardware problem being termed by gamers as the red ring of death due to the 4 power lights on the front of the console blinking red when there was a hardware failure. Microsoft never officially released any statistics that said exactly how many Xbox 360s were failing, but it was estimated by game journalists that as high as 40 to 50% of Xbox 360s sold during the time were prone to failure. That is not good. However, despite the problems with the red ring of death, it didn't really have a whole lot of effect on the Xbox 360 sales, and luckily Microsoft was very proactive with remediating the issue. They extended the console's manufacturer warranty. They released the Xbox 360 S model in 2010, which is what you see in front of you right now, which offered a new redesign and fixed most of the hardware problems that plagued the console. And in my opinion, is the best model of the Xbox 360. The console ended up selling about 84 million units worldwide throughout its entire lifespan between 2005 and 2016, slightly behind the PS3 and well behind the Nintendo Wii. But the Xbox 360, despite coming in third place in sales, it is a fantastic console, and in my opinion, the best console that Microsoft has ever made. And despite initially having some pretty troublesome hardware issues, the Xbox 360 did a lot of things right and made huge innovations in the industry. If the original Xbox built the initial foundation of the Xbox brand, then the Xbox 360 built on that foundation and made it a towering skyscraper of a brand. A brand that is still a big competitor to Nintendo and Sony to this day. Right next to the Wii, I remember growing up that the Xbox 360 was a very popular system at the time. However, despite its popularity, I never owned one of my own until about 2017. And while yes, I do like my PS3 a little more, there's no denying that the Xbox 360 is still a great system with a lot of really good exclusives. Like I said earlier in the video, this is the S model of the Xbox 360, which was released in 2010. And in my opinion, it's the best model to get because it is way more reliable than the earlier models of the Xbox 360, and it just looks better. There was actually a third redesign of the Xbox 360 called the Xbox 360e model, which was released around 2013. And aesthetically, it looks really similar to the Xbox 360S and is roughly the same size as well. But design-wise, it's supposed to look like the original model of the Xbox One. And right next to the S model, the E model is another good Xbox model to get. But if you're going to pick up an Xbox 360, either this one or the E model would be the best ones to get. So on the front of the console, we have a touch-sensitive eject button as well as a touch-sensitive power button. On the original models as well as the E models, these were just regular physical buttons. But on the Xbox 360 S model, they changed these to touch-sensitive buttons. They work just as well as physical buttons, but sometimes they're a little too sensitive, so if you are, like, say, plugging something into the back, you might sometimes accidentally press the eject button. So there are some times where you might accidentally turn on the system or accidentally eject the disc. But other than that, they're fine. We'll also find our tray loading disk drive, On the bottom right, we'll find a controller sync button, as well as two USB 2.0 ports. On the original model of the Xbox 360, there was actually two memory card slots here, and I think they made capacities up to like 512 megabytes, but basically those memory card slots were used to transfer saves as well as smaller game files between consoles. But on the S model and the E model, they removed the memory card slots. On the top of the console, we have the Xbox 360 logo as well as the cooling fan. On the original model, the cooling fan was actually on the back of the system, and it was actually two fans, and they got very, very loud because they were struggling to keep the system cool. So once they released the S model, they redesigned the chip to basically make it more power efficient, and they switched from using two fans on the back to just having one bigger fan on the top of the system that basically blows air out the top, and it's much more efficient and way quieter than the original models. On the right side of the console, we have two rubber feet to allow the system to basically stand up vertically, and if you pull this tab right here, that's where your user upgradable hard drive goes. I believe they made these hard drives up to a max of 500 gigabytes, and on the original model, the hard drive actually attached on the left side of the console. And on the Xbox 360 S and E models, they redesigned the actual hard drives themselves. So basically, these are only compatible with the S and E models. So if you want to upgrade your hard drive for the original models, you have to use the hard drives that are only compatible with those models. On the left side of the system, there's nothing but air intake vents. On the back of the system, we have AC power, a Kensington lock port, optical audio out, HDMI, AV out, Ethernet, Connect, which this was added on to the Xbox 360 S models, and essentially it was Microsoft's answer to the Wii's motion controls. The Connect was released around the same time as the Xbox 360 S model, but essentially it was a glorified webcam that tracked the user's motions. Think of it as basically controlling the game without a controller and just using your body. Even though older models of the Xbox 360 don't have the Kinect port, there is still a way to use the Kinect on older models. You just have to use an adapter. And finally, we have three more USB 2.0 ports. And this specific Xbox 360 was manufactured June 8th, 2010. On the bottom of the console, there's nothing but an Xbox 360 logo and four rubber feet for having the console sit horizontally. Here's the controller for the Xbox 360, and believe me when I tell you that this controller is a huge improvement over the original Xbox controller. They removed the black and white face buttons in favor of more traditional left and right shoulder buttons. They improved the left and right triggers, and of course, gave the controller wireless capabilities. I really like the Xbox 360 controller. It's actually one of the most comfortable controllers I've ever used, hands down. This controller was so well received that it actually set the future standard for controllers on PC. And it helped make controllers on PC much more commonplace, more intuitive to use, and way, way easier. And while yes, the controller did use AA batteries instead of a rechargeable battery like the PS3 controller used, but honestly, battery life on the Xbox 360 controller is really good. Battery life was estimated to be around 30 to 40 hours, which comparing that to the Nintendo Wii remote and the PS3 controller battery life, that's pretty impressive. And for those who don't want to bother with AA batteries, you can either use an optional rechargeable battery pack, or you can use the USB cable just by plugging it into the port right here and just use the controller wired. If there's one thing I really don't like about the Xbox 360 controller, it's the D-pad. It's not the worst D-pad I've ever used, but this is not a good D-pad at all. It's like they took the mediocre D-pad on the original Xbox controller and just made it worse for the 360. I mean, yeah, it does still work, but you gotta be pretty precise on your inputs, because if you're just gonna be rocking it with your thumb in the middle, it's not very precise at all. There was, however, a version of the 360 controller that had what's called a rotating D-pad, which basically you could take this piece right here on the D-pad and rotate it, and it would have this little indentation that would pop up and make the D-pad way more usable. But minus the annoying D-pad issue, this is still a fantastic controller. So, what exactly is powering the Xbox 360? Well, for starters, for CPU, it uses a PowerPC-based tri-core Xenon chip clocked at 3.2 GHz. For memory, it uses 512 megabytes of unified GDDR3 RAM clocked at 700 MHz and an additional 10 megabytes of EDRAM cache directly on the GPU. For storage, the Xbox 360S supports detachable hard drives up to 500 gigabytes, USB storage from 1 to 32 gigabytes, and up to 2 gigabytes of cloud storage using Xbox Live. There was a budget-level Xbox 360S that was released that had 4 gigabytes of built-in memory. On the original models, you could also use proprietary memory cards up to 512 megabytes in size. For display outputs, it supports composite video, S-video, RGB SCART, component video, D-terminal, VGA, and HDMI. For video resolutions, the Xbox 360 supports 480i, 480p, 720p, 1080i, 1024x768, 1280x768, 1280x1024, 1360x768, 1440x900, 1680x1050, and 1080p. For a graphics chip, it uses an ATI/AMD Xenos chip clocked at 500 MHz. For sound, it supports analog stereo, digital stereo, Dolby Digital 5.1, and Dolby Digital with WMA Pro. For connectivity, the Xbox 360S supports 100 megabit Ethernet and Wi-Fi 802.11bgn. And finally, the Xbox 360S weighs in at 6.4 pounds. You all know what time it is. It's time to finally plug this thing in and show it in action. Power is plugged in, HDMI is plugged in, let's go. And you hear a nice little beep when you turn the system on. And a nice little Xbox 360 splash screen. I gotta say, compared to the original models, the Xbox 360S is whisper quiet. That thing is really quiet. I really like that. The only thing about the Xbox 360S that's a little noisy is the fan inside the power brick. Right now it's fairly quiet, but while the system is running, it tends to kick up quite a bit. And here's the main menu of the Xbox 360, which I believe Microsoft calls the Metro dashboard. It's very similar to what they did with Windows 8, in which they used panels for the menu. A lot of people didn't like it. Me personally, it doesn't really bother me all that much. It is a little harder to find things on the main menu compared to on the PS3, but it's not a bad interface. I don't mind it. There was actually 3 redesigns of the Xbox 360 dashboard. First, there was the Blades dashboard, which released in 2005 when the console first launched. Then there was the new Xbox Experience dashboard, which released in 2008. And then finally in 2011, there was the Metro dashboard, which is what you currently see in front of you right now. So once you boot up the system and log into your Xbox Live account, you'll be greeted with the home section of the main menu, where you can do various options such as open and close the disk tray, check out the pinned apps that you have on the Xbox 360 dashboard, show your recent apps that you've been using, jump straight to the Microsoft Movies and TV app, check out the apps that you have downloaded, check out the games that you have downloaded, check out the help section, search for apps and games, and check out the games that are on sale with Xbox Live Gold. Moving to the far left section of the main menu will bring you to the Bing section, where you can use Bing to obviously search up various things on your Xbox, like searching for new games, new apps, and etc. Next is the social section, where you can manage your Xbox Live account, you can view the friends that you've added, you can check out your activity feed, you can check out the avatar store, where you can buy accessories for your avatar, which is basically Xbox equivalent to Mii's on Nintendo, and you can sign in or sign out of an account. Moving to the games section, here's where you can view the games that you've downloaded. You can download DLC, you can download demos, you can browse the game catalog, you can search for specific games, you can search for games using an A to Z order list, and you'll see advertisements for popular games. Moving to the movies and TV sections, where you can view the video apps that you have downloaded on your Xbox. You can jump straight to the Microsoft Movies and TV app where you can buy and rent movies and TV shows. You can search for specific movies and TV shows. You can check out new releases. And you can also view advertisements for the latest movies. The app section is where you can check out the apps that you have downloaded on your system. You can check out new releases for apps. You can search for apps using specific keywords. You can browse the app catalog. And you can view the top entertainment apps on Xbox. And finally, we have the settings section where we can change settings for the Xbox system itself, such as the console name, display settings, audio, language, and remote control settings, adjust settings for Connect, adjust settings for storage, network settings, computer connection settings where you can basically set up Windows Media Center on a PC and turn your Xbox 360 into a media center, which is pretty cool. Change your TV provider, adjust settings for Xbox Live Vision, and initial setup. On the settings section, we'll also find shortcuts for your Xbox profile settings, your preferences, Connect settings, Xbox Live account settings, privacy settings, family settings, and a shortcut to turn off the system. Pressing the Xbox button in the middle of the controller will bring up the Xbox guide, where you can do various things such as view the battery percentage of your controller, check to see what player is assigned to the controller, jump straight to the Xbox dashboard if you're playing a game or using an application, view your friends, set up an Xbox party, view your messages, check out the activity of all your Xbox friends, start a chat with someone, and open the tray. On the games and apps section, we can check out our achievements, we can check out our awards, we can check out recent games and apps we've been using, we can jump straight to our My Games section, check our active downloads, redeem a code, and check our activity feed. On the media section, we can jump straight to the system video player, system music player, which, just like the original Xbox, you can rip your audio CDs straight to the Xbox 360 hard drive, which is awesome. We can view pictures that we have saved on the Xbox, we can set up Windows Media Center, and we have music controls to basically play music in the background. Finally, we have the settings section of the Xbox guide, which is basically the exact same settings as on the settings section on the main menu. You can edit your profile, your preferences, your family settings, your system settings, account management, and turn off your console from this menu. Can I just say that for a console from 2005, it's pretty feature-filled and it still feels surprisingly somewhat modern today. Alright, let's show off some of my games that I have for the Xbox 360, starting with my physical games. I have a decent selection. Luckily, the Xbox 360 is getting old enough to where games are still relatively cheap nowadays. Just like the original Xbox, there's quite a few games in the Xbox 360 library that are part of the backwards compatibility program on Xbox One and Xbox Series S and X, which may be why some Xbox 360 games are a little more expensive than PS3 games, but not by much. There's not really a whole lot of price difference between PS3 games and Xbox 360. They're pretty close, or at least as of recording this video. Starting off, we have Rage. This is actually a pretty good FPS, and one that many people don't really talk about nowadays, considering it's from the same people who made Doom and Quake. Good voice acting, good graphics, solid frame rate at 60 FPS, plenty of fun side missions. It's overall a pretty good game. It is a little on the short side, and the story can be kind of subpar, but honestly, it's a decent game. I do recommend it. Plus, they ended up making a sequel on PS4 and Xbox One. One thing to keep in mind about the Xbox 360 version is it comes on multiple discs. Because the Xbox 360 uses standard DVDs, a lot of games, especially the bigger ones that came out later in the generation, had to split games onto multiple discs. So just keep that in mind if you're going to pick up the Xbox 360 version. But luckily, just like modern consoles, you can install the game data from the disc onto the Xbox 360 hard drive, which increases load times and reduces wear and tear on your disk drive, so that's a plus. Halo Reach. This would end up being Bungie's last Halo game released on the Xbox 360. And honestly, even though it's a spin-off game, it is a really, really good Halo game. Great graphics, great gameplay, great voice acting, amazing multiplayer. It's overall a fantastic game. One thing to keep in mind though, as of recording this video, Bungie is planning on shutting down the online servers for all Halo games on Xbox 360 in December of 2021. So if you want to experience the original multiplayer experience on all the Halo games on 360, Now is the time to do it. The Orange Box. This is a great compilation of 3 of Valve's greatest games of 2007. Half-Life 2, including episodes 1 and 2, Portal, and Team Fortress 2. Everybody knows that the best way to play Valve's games is on PC, but if you're going to play these games on console, the Xbox 360 version is by far the best way to play it. The Orange Box is also available on PS3, but that version has significant performance issues and plenty of bugs and glitches, so I would still recommend the Xbox 360 version. Plus, I believe it's backwards compatible on Xbox One and Xbox Series X and S. The Gears of War series are some of the best third-person shooters on Xbox 360. These games are absolutely amazing. These games take full advantage of Unreal Engine 3 and look absolutely beautiful even to this day. Not to mention great characters, great voice acting, fantastic multiplayer. If you're going to pick up an Xbox 360, you must have Gears of War in your collection. The original trilogy is absolutely amazing. Forza Motorsport 4. I'm not much of a racing simulator fan, but Forza Motorsport is an exception. Believe me when I say that Forza Motorsport 4 might actually be the best looking racing game on Xbox 360. Even 10 years later, this game still looks beautiful. Plus, it's got Kinect support, a wide selection of cars to drive, and even the cast of the Top Gear TV show. That is awesome. I've noticed a lot of racing game fans love to put this game and Gran Turismo 5 side by side and basically argue over which one's better. Well, I played both games, and honestly, I do prefer Forza Motorsport. I don't know why. I just feel like they have a better car selection. It looks and plays a little better than Gran Turismo 5, and honestly, Gran Turismo 5 was a little too racing simulator for me. And I've noticed that Forza Motorsport 4 has a more arcade racing feeling to it. This is definitely another must-have for any Xbox 360 owner. Xbox Live Arcade. Microsoft made a couple of these Xbox Live Arcade compilation discs. This is the only one that I own. I believe this one has Luxor 2, Feeding Frenzy, and some poker game I can't think of on the top of my head. There's not really much else to say about this one. It's a compilation disc with pretty fun Xbox Live Arcade games. Yeah. Project Gotham Racing 3. Another really good racing game for the Xbox 360, and a launch title too. Even though this game came out all the way back in 2005, it still looks and plays great today. Great soundtrack, plenty of cars to drive, great graphics, and great controls. This is definitely a must-have. You can't talk about the Xbox 360 without mentioning Halo 3. This game is absolutely amazing. By far one of the biggest and most anticipated game launches of 2007, and hell, maybe even one of the biggest game launches ever. Halo 3 is just an absolute masterpiece. What else can I say that hasn't been said already about Halo 3? Great graphics, fantastic gameplay, great story, amazing multiplayer. It's a no-brainer. You must have this in your Xbox 360 library. If you don't, I will hunt you down and make you buy this game. Halo 3 ODST. This is a side game to Halo 3 that released a couple years after Halo 3, and honestly, it's a really good side game. It's been a while since I played this game, but if memory stands correct, I think it takes place either before the first game or just before the second game. I can't quite remember, but I digress. Just like what I said about Halo 3, this game has great graphics, great gameplay, fantastic voice acting, great story, fantastic multiplayer. Yeah, I'm basically repeating myself at this point. It's Halo. Duh, of course it's good. And that's all my physical games, but I feel like we're missing some. I swear I had more of them. Where did I put them? Oh, now I remember. So, at one point in time, Burger King thought it was a good idea to make their own Xbox 360 games. Yeah. They ended up making 3 or 4 of them, and I have the first 2 here. Sneak King and Big Bumpin'. Yeah, these games are... How do I put this lightly? Bad. I'm not going to go into full detail about the Burger King Xbox games, but look up the history online. It's quite interesting. So, why exactly do I have these games in my collection? Because I got them for like $1 each at a thrift store, and they're just an interesting piece of video game history. Or at least, to me, they are. Plus, as far as I'm aware, these Burger King Xbox 360 games were literally the only Xbox 360 games ever released that also had an original Xbox version on the same disc. Yeah, I'm not joking. See? Look it. Right there. Clear as day. So yeah, aside from collecting, I do not recommend the Burger King Xbox games at all. Now let's move on to my digital games. Starting off, we have Torchlight. This is actually a pretty fun dungeon crawler game. It plays a lot like Diablo. Even though technically it is a Diablo clone, it's actually a pretty good one. The game is also available on PC, but this is literally the only console port that Torchlight ever got, or at least the first game. And honestly, it looks and plays pretty decent on 360. It does suffer in the frame rate department sometimes, especially when there's a lot of stuff going on, but still, if you enjoy Diablo-esque type games, you'll enjoy Torchlight. Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare. Right next to the original game, I gotta say, Garden Warfare is one of my favorite Plants vs. Zombies game. This is so much fun. I played a ridiculous amount of this game in college on my PS3, but the Xbox 360 is still a really good version. You're probably asking, why exactly did I buy this game twice? Well, I mean, it still plays fine on PS3, but there's a lot of server issues on PS3. It can be quite buggy sometimes. There's actually been times that I've loaded into a match and the map was like half loaded in. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it is quite annoying. Plus, not to mention, it's getting a little harder to find matches on PS3 right now, which is kind of why I purchased the Xbox 360 version as well. And yes, the game plays a lot better on PS4 and Xbox One, but despite the Xbox 360's age, I can still find plenty of matches on this game. Way more often than on PS3, that's for sure. The first Garden Warfare game is not perfect, no matter what platform you play it on. The leveling up system is pretty mediocre. It sometimes feels like it takes way too long to unlock new content. And sometimes the maps can repeat themselves a little too often. But other than that, even though they improved a lot in the sequel, the first Garden Warfare game is still a really fun game to come back to, no matter what platform you play it on. However, because PS3 and Xbox 360 are fairly old nowadays, if you want to continue playing this game, I do recommend playing it on PC, Xbox One, or PS4. But if you're still rocking an Xbox 360 in 2021, you're in luck. You can still find quite a few matches, at least for now. Split Second. This is only a demo version, and I have not played it yet, so unfortunately I can't really say anything about it. Burnout Revenge. This has got to be one of my favorite racing games ever. Burnout Revenge is so much fun. Despite being a pretty early title on Xbox 360, it still looks and plays great today. Not to mention great soundtrack, plenty of cars to drive, and a real sense of speed. This game is so much fun. If you love racing games, you must play Burnout Revenge. Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. This was a side game that was released around a year after Far Cry 3 released. And it's a pretty interesting game, and like in the best way possible. The game's atmosphere is heavily inspired by 80s sci-fi pop culture, and the game looks absolutely beautiful with plenty of neon colors. If you've ever played a Far Cry game, you should know how absolutely ridiculous those games are, but in the best way possible. And Blood Dragon is no exception. No matter what platform you own, you need to play Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. It is quite the experience. Plus, you don't actually need Far Cry 3 to play this game, since Blood Dragon is its own game. And it's also backwards compatible on Xbox One. Zoo Tycoon. Again, this is a demo version, and I haven't played it yet, so I can't really give my opinion on it. Although I do remember playing Zoo Tycoon on the DS growing up. Wonder if this game's kind of like that. Maybe. Hydro Thunder Hurricane. This is a sequel to the Hydro Thunder arcade game from the 90s, and it's a really, really good sequel. So much fun. Great track design, great graphics, plenty of boats to drive, amazing multiplayer. It's a no-brainer. this is definitely a must-have for your 360. Tempest. This is basically a Xbox Live Arcade reimagining of the Tempest arcade game from Atari. And I haven't played a whole lot of this game. I remember playing a demo a couple of years ago, and just recently bought the full game. I haven't had a whole lot of time to play this game, but from what I played from that demo version, it's actually pretty fun. But other than that, that's really all I can say about it. Body count. Again, this is a demo version. I haven't played it before, although I think, if memory stands correct, I believe it is a spiritual successor to Black on PS2 and Xbox. But that's really all I can say about it. I haven't played this game yet. Marathon Durandal. Again, this is a demo version. I haven't played it yet, although it's made by Bungie, and I believe this was actually one of the first games that they ever developed. And it originally was exclusive to the Mac. But other than that, can't really say anything else about it. Discs of Tron. This is actually a really fun arcade game from the 80s. In case you couldn't tell, this game is based on the Disney Tron movie from the 80s. And it's so much fun. Despite it being from the 80s, this game still plays fantastic. And it definitely helps that the game is upscaled to beautiful high definition. If you love yourself some 80s arcade games, Discs of Tron is a fun one. Perfect Dark. Originally released on the Nintendo 64 by Rare, this is essentially a remaster of the game with a few under-the-hood quality of life improvements. In my opinion, this is by far the best version of Perfect Dark. It runs beautifully in high definition and at a full 60 frames per second, which makes it way more playable than the original Nintendo 64 version, that's for sure. I haven't gotten very far in this game, but I've heard it's one of the best Rare games ever made. You owe it to yourself to play it. Astropop. This is another really fun game made by PopCap. Think of it as Arkanoid, but with the Match 3 gameplay of Bejeweled. I know, kind of a weird combination, but it's actually really fun. No matter if you play it on PC or Xbox 360, it's a fun game. Rock of Ages. This game is so much fun. It pokes fun at a lot of the Greek mythology, but like in a tongue-in-cheek, corny kind of way, which I love. With the power of Unreal Engine 3, this game looks and plays beautiful on Xbox 360, even today. And yes, they have made 2 sequels since the release of this game, but honestly, even the first game is still great today. Give this one a go. You'll have a great time. I absolutely loved the MX vs. ATV series on PS2, and Untamed is no exception. I originally owned the PS2 version of this game, but I do not recommend playing it on there. It's buggy, it's got frame rate issues, it's got control issues, it's just not a great port. So if you're going to play this game, the Xbox 360 or PS3 versions are the best way to play it. Like I said about MX vs. ATV back when I did my PS2 review, MX vs. ATV Untamed is more of the same, which, you know, isn't really a bad thing. It's still a great game. Star Wars Battlefront 2. This is essentially an original Xbox game running in backwards compatibility on Xbox 360 and Xbox One, and I haven't noticed any bugs whatsoever. It plays beautifully, even on Xbox 360. I originally had this game back on the PS2 growing up, but the frame rate in that game was absolutely atrocious, especially in split screen. It was next to unplayable at times. And luckily the Xbox version is a lot better. If you've been having the urge to go back to the original Battlefront 2, if you're going to play the game on console, the Xbox 360 or Xbox One version is by far the most convenient way to do it. Beyond Good and Evil HD. This is a fantastic HD remaster of one of my favorite Ubisoft games. Despite the game's age, it still looks beautiful and looks even better in high definition and a full 60 FPS. Plus, not to mention some pretty welcome quality of life improvements. If you've never played Beyond Good and Evil, you owe it to yourself to play it at least once. It is a great game. Ubisoft, what are you doing? Get cracking on Beyond Good and Evil 2. We want to play it, damn it. We waited so long. Spec Ops: The Line. Again, this is a demo version. I haven't played it yet. I can't really say anything about it. Alien Hominid HD. This was originally a browser-based Flash game back in the 2000s that originally got a console port on the GameCube and PS2, But then I think around 2006 got a high-definition remaster on Xbox 360. This is by far the best way to play Alien Hominid. It is so much fun. Vanquish. Again, this is only a demo version. I haven't played it yet, although I've heard some really good things about this game. But other than that, I can't really say anything about it. Sorry. Skate 3. Oh man, I enjoy this game so much, but for all the wrong reasons. This game is notorious for being absolutely broken. This game is so glitchy. But somehow, that's what makes it really, really fun. Yeah, sure, any skater can do an ollie, but have you ever seen a skater literally glitch through the ground and shoot off into the stars like a cannonball? Just search up Skate 3 glitch compilations. You'll see what I'm talking about. But in all seriousness, despite all the glitches in this game, it's still a pretty good skating game, although it's not really my kind of game. Literally the only reason why I bought this game is to just screw around and glitch the hell out of it. Hexic HD. It's a decent puzzle game. It's not anything spectacular. It does get a little boring at times, at least for me. But if you're looking for a decent puzzle game on your 360, it's not a bad choice. Call of Duty Classic. This is basically a console port of the original Call of Duty game that was originally a PC exclusive back in the 2000s. But it's only a demo version and I haven't played any of it. So, of course, can't say anything about it. Res HD. Guess what? It's another demo version and I haven't played it yet. Go figure. Star Raiders. Again, it's a demo version. I haven't played any of it yet. I'm basically repeating myself at this point. Heavy Weapon. Again, this is only a demo version, although I remember playing a lot of this game on the PC growing up, and it is a fantastic game. PopCap really knows how to make amazing games. Whether you play the game on PC, Xbox 360, or PS3, you're going to have a great time. And finally, we have Duke Nukem 3D. Oh wait, sorry. Duke Nukem 3D. And wouldn't you guess, it's a demo version, and I haven't played it yet. Utterly disgraceful. Duke Nukem would be so ashamed of me right now. The buttons on the Xbox 360 controller feel a lot better than on the original Xbox. Like I said in my original Xbox review video, those buttons weren't bad, but they were just a little on the clunky side. They were a little better on Xbox 360. I mean, I shouldn't say a little bit. They're a lot better. I do still prefer the buttons on the PS3 controller, but there's no denying that these buttons are a huge improvement over the original Xbox controller. The analog sticks on the Xbox 360 also feel really nice and responsive, barely any dead zone. Unlike the analog sticks on the PS3 controller, the Xbox 360's analog sticks are concave instead of convex, which, you know, I prefer either or. I don't really have a favorite kind of analog stick grip. But you know, the grips on the Xbox 360 controller work well enough. By far the best part about the Xbox 360 controller has got to be the triggers. These are a huge improvement over the original Xbox controller. Yes, they were fine on the original Xbox, but like I mentioned in that video, they can feel a little stiff at times and it does tend to hurt my fingers. These are a lot more loose and way more responsive. When it comes to playing racing games like Forza 4, I much prefer the Xbox 360 controller. Absolutely, without a doubt. And you know, despite the Xbox 360 being a console from 2005, most of its games, especially the later ones, still hold up great today. Just like the PS3, it probably has something to do with the console having high definition capabilities. Unfortunately, the only bad thing about the Xbox 360 controller is the D-pad. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, it's not great. Not the worst D-pad I've ever used, but compared to the PS3 controller, you really have to be precise on your movements. Otherwise, it's not very accurate at all. Something I may or may not have mentioned earlier in the video is the Xbox 360 is actually backwards compatible with original Xbox games, although not the entire library, unfortunately. There was only about 300 to 400 original Xbox games that were made backwards compatible on 360. And unlike the original model of the PS3 that had actual built-in PS2 hardware, the Xbox 360 uses emulation, which isn't bad. There are some original Xbox games that play perfectly on 360 despite it being emulation, and they look beautiful on 360 because they upscaled to a full 720p. And I gotta say, with the games that work flawlessly on 360, it's by far one of the best ways to play original Xbox games. It's not all perfect though. There are some games that have a few technical issues here and there. Right now I'm playing Outrun 2, and overall it plays decently well on 360, although it does suffer from slowdowns every once in a while, and the intro cutscene stutters a lot. So you'll be expecting some minor technical issues like that most of the time. In worst case scenarios, there are some games that have technical issues that are bad enough to crash the whole console, but most of the time those can be remedied by a simple reboot. And so, that was the Microsoft Xbox 360. Despite technically coming in last place in terms of sales compared to the PS3 and Wii, the Xbox 360 was a huge success for Microsoft and did a lot of things right. It definitely wasn't perfect though. Yes, it was pretty prone to failure early in its lifespan. Yes, the PS3 did have way better multimedia features than 360 did, but there's no denying that this is a fantastic console and one that still holds up great even to this day. With many, many must-play exclusives and amazing Xbox Live multiplayer experience that is still active to this day, the Xbox 360 is still a great console. So, do I recommend an Xbox 360? I'd say yes. Yes, I do. Even though the Xbox One and Xbox Series S and X have backwards compatibility for Xbox 360, they're not backwards compatible with every Xbox 360 game. So, it still somewhat makes sense to play those games on the original Xbox 360 console. Although if you're going to pick one up, I highly recommend either the S or the E model. Do not pick up the original models because those are especially prone to failure, and as the years go on, those things are going to be harder to find in working condition. I honestly did not expect myself to enjoy the Xbox 360 as much as I did when I first got one in 2017, considering I was very attached to my PS3 in college. But after owning one for 4 years now, it is a great console and it's got so many great exclusives. Probably some of the best that the Xbox has ever had, bar none. So that wraps up another review. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. The buttons on the Xbox 360 controller definitely feel a lot... Really? This dog, I tell ya. She always wants to be in my videos.